Friends, today I would like to share with you an amazing story about the impressions of a German who came to Russia for the first time to participate in the Sberbank project. His visit turned into a real sensation, and he couldn't help but be surprised by what he saw. This man was shocked by the quality of the service and the high level of technological development in the country. He stressed that everything that the German media say about Russia is not true. According to him, Russia is not at all a backward dictatorship, but on the contrary, it is a high-tech country, ahead of London, Paris, and New York in many respects. This German story is vivid evidence of how much stereotypes and bias distort reality. The issue will be very interesting, friends. We are starting. Russia has long been a mysterious country for many in the West. Her image is shaped more by fantasies than by real facts. The media continues to create a picture of a harsh and dangerous state that allegedly poses a threat to the entire civilized world. This artificially created myth is doing its job. Foreigners are afraid to visit the country, believing that there is a dictatorship here, there is no freedom, and Russians allegedly only think about conflicts with neighboring countries. However, everything changes as soon as a person crosses the Russian border. Many foreigners coming to Russia for the first time admit that expectations and reality do not coincide at all. They are amazed at how different the country is from what the Western media shows. Instead of gloomy streets, there is bustling life, friendly people, and an atmosphere of hospitality. Stereotypes about Russia are already so ingrained that destroying them is not an easy task. Western politicians are adding fuel to the fire with their statements. For example, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who claims to be the leader of European diplomacy, said that pressure must be exerted on Russia, otherwise conflict in Europe is inevitable. These statements encourage people to perceive Russia as the source of all problems. Fear becomes the basis of foreign policy strategies, and dialogue and cooperation fade into the background. A similar position is taken by the new president of Finland, Alexander Stubb, who said that Russia must come to terms with the fact that its neighbors increasingly consider membership in NATO and the EU as the only way to feel safe. Many people, having visited Moscow, St. Petersburg, Sochi, and other cities, admit that Russia is completely different from what Western media shows. Why is there such a perception of friends? This is largely due to the constant discussions of Russia at high levels of world politics. Slogans about defending democratic values, which sound noble, actually only increase tension. However, there is a huge potential for improving relations beyond political discussions. Those who have personally visited Russia often say, if everyone could see this country with their own eyes, the tension would disappear by itself. The personal impressions of those who dared to look at Russia with their own eyes speak louder than any news. Maybe such stories will be the first step towards building bridges instead of new walls. The media plays a crucial role in shaping the image of any country. However, behind the loud headlines, the real picture is often lost. Those who come to Russia for the first time are often overwhelmed by its diversity. They discover the developed infrastructure, modern technologies, and sincere goodwill of Russians. The 2018 FIFA World Cup was a particularly striking example of this perception. The foreign guests who attended this event called it one of the best in their lives. The warm and festive atmosphere of that championship was hardly associated with the threat that some Western politicians and the media are talking about. The last few years have shown that policy towards Russia is raising more and more questions in Europe. Economic difficulties, growing discontent among the population, and a high level of tension became the subject of discussion. Nevertheless, the idea of containing Russia continues to resound in the rhetoric of many Western politicians. According to this logic, increased pressure should lead to changes, but is it so? Reality shows that instead of pressure, it would be more effective to look for common ground. Meanwhile, foreigners who dare to come to Russia say something completely different. They say that Russia is not an enemy, but a country with a rich culture, deep history, and amazing people who, like in any other country, just want to live in peace. A French traveler who visited Siberia described his impressions as follows. There is real freedom here. People live their lives, enjoy nature, and don't think about enslaving or conquering anyone at all. Such stories destroy ingrained stereotypes. And the only question is whether politicians and the media are ready to listen to those who see Russia with their own eyes, and not through the prism of myths and guesses. It is especially interesting to hear the opinion of a German, Oliver Kempkins, who visited Russia for the first time. This is how he described his impressions. When I was offered to temporarily move to Russia to participate in a major Sberbank project, I was, frankly, slightly shocked. Colleagues were vying to give out advice. Be careful. There are bears walking the streets. People are aggressive. They just think about how to deceive someone. All these stereotypes that the German media feeds us made me expect something like a post-apocalyptic plot. But work is work, and I packed my bags. The first thing that struck me was the airport. Everything is fast, clearly organized, no chaos, which for some reason I expected. The taxi driver was polite and friendly, and the car, although not new, was in perfect condition. Even then, the thought crept into my mind, are we really being fed lies all this time? After my first impression of the Moscow airport, my surprise only intensified. Then I found myself on the subway. My God, the Moscow metro is not just a transport. It is a real masterpiece of art. Marble columns, chandeliers, paintings. I had the feeling that I was not on my way to work, but in a museum. And all this was not only beautiful, but also incredibly convenient. No delays. Trains run every 2 minutes. By comparison, in Berlin, I often stand on the platform for 10 to 15 minutes, trying to figure out if the train will arrive at all. However, I experienced a real cultural shock when I was confronted with the level of service. In Germany, you often hear the typical "wait 20 minutes, and maybe we'll serve you." Everything is different here. The greeting begins with the phrase, "How can we help? Would you like some coffee while you're waiting?" Your manager has already been called. My first visit to the Sberbank branch went so smoothly that I seriously wondered, why is this not the case? Here, the customer is really the king, not the annoying factor. Technology deserves special attention. In a bank, for example, almost all operations are performed through a mobile application. It takes literally seconds to open an account, transfer money, and pay for utilities. In Germany, I still sometimes carry a piece of paper with me to pay for something. The question arises, who is really a developed country here? Taxi is a separate story. Through the app, you can call a car that will arrive in just 3 minutes. The driver is polite, the car is clean, payment is made via phone. No problems with cash or bank cards. The service in Russia is really amazing. For example, you can order food at any time of the day, even on a Saturday night. One day, when my speakers broke down, I just ordered new ones home. They arrived in a matter of minutes. Comparing with the USA, where I spent a lot of time, I can say that the quality of service in Moscow is much better and cheaper. In California, such levels of service were not even dreamed of. You can order almost anything in Moscow. For example, we called a massage therapist home at 11 p.m. 5 times a week. He would bring his own couch, have a massage, and then leave. Do you want to go to the spa at night? You are welcome. Would you like to order sushi at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday morning? No problem. It will be delivered within 15 minutes via the app. Yandex is a different story. Once started as a browser, this company now manages taxis, food delivery, and more. Here, you can do everything in one application. Order a taxi with 6 categories to choose from: groceries, medicines, furniture relocation, or even flowers for a girl you just met at a club. You can order delivery without specifying an address, just by using the recipient's phone number. One day at 4 in the morning, my friend called for an intravenous infusion after a party to sober up faster. All of this is not only possible, but it works perfectly. When I returned to Europe, I was overcome by the feeling that I was in the past. There are not many amenities that I am used to in Moscow. This is strange, given that Russia is often portrayed in the media as a medieval dictatorship. However, in this dictatorship, the willingness to help the client, the level of service and technological solutions are significantly ahead of those that I have seen in German cities. These impressions made me think, why does the service remain at such a high level in Germany, where they love to talk about progress so much? And why is the service not only convenient but also affordable in Russia, which is often criticized? Everyone will probably find the answers to these questions on their own. But for me, Russia has become a discovery that has destroyed many stereotypes and forced me to look at the country in a completely different way. When I think about cities like London or Paris, the question arises whether they can compete with Russia at least a little. London? No, I've lived there and I know for a fact that it can't compare. In Berlin, waiting for a taxi can take half an hour, and the driver is also unhappy that you decided to go somewhere at all. As for the people, my expectations were shattered. In the German media, Russians are often described as sullen, withdrawn, and almost aggressive. In fact, I saw exactly the opposite. People are friendly, willing to help, and even if they have their own difficulties, they try not to show it. One day, I got into conversation with a woman in a cafe. She found out that I was from Germany and asked, "Is it true that you have such a bad opinion of Russia?" When I honestly replied that the German media often portrayed Russia in a black light, she just smiled bitterly. "Well, we are used to it. The main thing is that we know who we are. Russians don't want conflicts." None of those with whom I spoke expressed aggression towards either the Germans or the Europeans in general. On the contrary, many people said that they wanted all conflicts to end so that people could just live in peace. But when it comes to protecting your country, there's only one opinion. Until the end, this sense of patriotism and faith in one's homeland deserve respect. What is particularly striking is the sarcasm with which Russians treat lies in foreign media. One of my colleagues joked, "They'll probably write tomorrow that we drink vodka with bears in the morning." And this sarcasm has its own power. Russians understand how they are being demonized, and they accept it with amazing resilience. After this trip, I returned to Germany with a completely different outlook on the world. I realized how much our own media is deceiving us, creating an image of the enemy where there is none. Russia is a country of people who just want to live and be happy. They are open, kind, and incredibly resilient in the face of adversity. Now, when I hear the latest accusations against Russia, I can't help but laugh sarcastically. Russia is not at all what they are trying to portray it as. This is not a bear with balalaika, but an amazing country with amazing people who deserve respect. Perhaps it's time for the German media to do something more useful than writing fairy tales. Friends, it seems to me that over the past 25 years, the West has been surprisingly persistent in underestimating Russia. This manifested itself not only in strategic miscalculations, but also in small things, which now turn into unpleasant surprises. Even Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, admits in her memoirs, "The West never believed that Russia would take threats too literally. However, time has shown that these illusions have come at a high cost." Merkel recalls that the West believed that even if provocations and threats against Russia continued, Putin would remain restrained, limiting himself to diplomacy. However, underestimating that Russia does not intend to turn a blind eye to actions that it perceives as existential threats has become a fatal mistake. Today, when Moscow warns about the consequences of supplying long-range missiles, the same notes of arrogance are heard in the rhetoric of the West. This is just waving a nuclear club. But nervousness is increasingly visible behind these statements. Russia's hypersonic missiles are no longer a theoretical threat. This is a proven reality. They recently destroyed strategically important facilities, and Putin cautiously reminded them that this was far from the limit of their capabilities. His words, "There is enough hazel for everyone," sounded casual, but their meaning did not go unnoticed even across the ocean. Nevertheless, the Western world continues to live in a world of illusions, ignoring Moscow's warnings. Analysts such as Scott Reither warn, ignoring Russian red lines is a strategy that only leads to escalation. Russia has repeatedly stated that its red lines are non-negotiable, but the West stubbornly pretends that these lines do not exist. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, known for his moderate views, emphasizes that underestimating Russia's ability to adapt to sanctions is another strategic mistake. According to him, sanctions have become an incentive for internal development. In 2023, Russia increased exports of high-tech equipment to Asian and Latin American countries. This was made possible by the creation of new production chains and the reorientation to markets that value real economic benefits rather than political slogans. Nevertheless, Western media continue to portray Russia as a gas station with outdated infrastructure. It is convenient to maintain a sense of moral superiority, but it does not correspond to reality. Statements about Moscow's military exhaustion remain one of the most striking examples of underestimating Russia. Officials in Europe claim that Russia is on the verge of defeat, while Russian design bureaus continue to introduce new weapons models. Putin has unequivocally stated that these developments are ready for mass production and will have characteristics that will change the global balance of power. However, instead of taking this seriously, the West is once again ignoring the signals, leading to another round of escalation. Underestimating Russia has become a chronic condition of Western political thought. Previously, this temporarily worked as a tool of pressure on Moscow, but now it turns into growing risks for the West itself. John Kirby, a former intelligence officer, noted, "To ignore Putin's statements is to play with fire." These words are becoming more and more relevant. It's time to realize that the Russian leader's statements are not just rhetoric, but a direct warning. This time, Russia is really not going to joke around. And now I would like to express my opinion on the material, friends. After reading the material, I was genuinely impressed by Oliver Kempkin's courage and outspokenness. In an environment where Western media often create a stereotypical and one-sided image of Russia, his words sound like a fresh breeze. Oliver did not just talk about his impressions, but tried to show Russia through the eyes of a man who was ready to see the real country behind the propaganda cliches. His willingness to speak openly about people, culture, and service in Russia deserves great respect. It is especially important that Oliver did not just list what surprised him, but conducted an honest analysis, from high-tech service and hospitality to stereotypes that are so firmly rooted in the West. He was not afraid to say that reality contradicts the usual myths, and this showed not only his sincerity, but also his willingness to go against the mainstream. In this interview, he showed Russia as a vibrant and multifaceted country where people not only experience difficulties, but also preserve humanity and optimism. It seems to me that such statements are especially valuable in our time, because they bring us closer to understanding each other. Oliver Kempkins has taken an important step towards breaking down barriers that are often built on fear and misunderstanding. His interview is an example of how it is possible and necessary to talk about other countries, with respect, interest, and willingness to learn from them what may still have to be mastered in Europe. Thank you for your attention. Friends, I wish you good health. See you soon.